Hello, everybody. As you're filling in, please go ahead and scan that QR code or type in the URL just for COVID tracking purposes. If you don't mind, we'd appreciate it. We'll be starting in a couple minutes. Thank you for being here. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I am very excited to be up here talking to you in person. After last year, to be up here and see people out there is wonderful. And hello to you at home. I know we are live streaming this as well. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tom Doherty. I'm one of the school counselors here. Also oversee our College and Career Center down right off of the cafeteria. So first of all, students, I encourage you to come on in and see me. Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, I'm there to help and to help guide you through the process of the college search or anything that you need. With us here tonight, over to my right, is Ms. Darcy Hutzler. She's our Director of Guidance. So thank you for being here. And also, in a few minutes, I'll be introducing Marina Pasquale, who is our ISAC rep and is partnering with Metea Valley for some exciting things this fall, especially. As you came in, I have a few handouts in my hand. Hopefully you got all three of these and maybe Marina's card as well. We put that up there. The larger sheet of paper has lots of different events. This is something that we haven't done in the past and we're instituting this year. So Marina is going to be here on October 8th and October 22nd during all of our lunch periods, helping students with the financial aid process, any specific questions. She'll be there to answer those questions and work with students. The second thing that I put on the sheet is called Conquering College Costs. We did this last year with Mr. Frank Palmasani. He's had over 45 years in education. He's kind of a guru in the area. He's well known in the area. We're honored that he's chosen our school to work with. But it's a video that's out there already. It's in our video library on our website. You can go ahead and watch it. It's an hour long. But he talks about trying to find the right fit. As you know, colleges cost lots of money. You know, we're talking $100,000, $200,000 when you look at all 4 years. And Frank does a great job with trying to present you with options to try to make that a little bit more affordable with scholarships and other ideas. So I'd highly encourage you to watch that video at your own leisure. And then on October 19th at 7 o'clock, we're going to do a live Zoom with Frank. He'll be there and answering all the different questions that you may have at that particular point. He'll give a brief summary, and then it's mostly a Q&A type session. And then last, on October 25th, again, thanks to Marina, she's going to be here, or one of the ISAC representatives is going to be here to help families fill out the FAFSA. If you would like to come in with a little bit of assistance, bring your Chromebook. Students, bring the Chromebook or a laptop so you can connect to our Wi-Fi. We've done away with a lot of computer labs, unfortunately, because we're one-to-one with the Chromebooks, but bring that Chromebook in and somebody from ISAC will be here to help with the FAFSA. Next slide, please. If you attended our junior night or senior night or have seen some of our announcements, you'll know that we have been really stressing our MeteaCounseling.org website. And again, if you haven't heard of it, it's designed to be kind of a dashboard for all of our families, 9 through 12. with lots of resources. Kind of comes from a background of working with students, being a parent ourselves, lots of our staff in our department, our parents, and we definitely wanted a place where you could go and get information as parents, as students, in one spot. So check out that website. One thing I wanted to show in regards to the financial aid resources that we have, they are all linked up there. The middle one says local scholarship offerings. Scholarship season usually comes more in the winter and early spring, but there are some scholarships that we've been posting there. Anything that comes our way, we'll post on that local scholarship offerings tab. Also at the far right are the Metea Unified Scholarships. Those have been here since the start of Metea Valley when we had seniors, and those, it's about, I would say, between $10,000 and $20,000 worth of scholarships that go exclusively to our seniors. So keep that in mind, seniors, and mid-February is about when that opens. You see the tab at the far right. And then the scholarship flow chart, I'd just like to highlight real quickly before I turn it over to Marina. So if we could go to the next slide, please. This is that scholarship flow chart. I realize you might not be able to see all the words at this point, but it is on our site. Feel free to take a look at it. We talk about different scholarships and where to look. At the left talks about local scholarships. That's at our website on that local scholarships tab. Also, some of our students are looking on school links there. When you go to the finances tab and click on scholarship matching. The other way to look for scholarships, or kind of the largest, usually the largest amounts of scholarships, come from the colleges themselves. Oftentimes, this is from merit, it's called merit money, and it's oftentimes awarded based on your application. Oftentimes, you don't need to fill out a separate application, but sometimes you do. But I would suggest that you definitely look at the colleges closely that you are thinking of applying to, and try and talk with them to kind of see what scholarships are offered, and make sure that you're not missing anything on the college's end, because the colleges are oftentimes the largest source of scholarships for our students. And then over at the right, you can search the web for more national scholarships. The libraries may even have some books on that, but oftentimes students are doing that online. And we have some websites at the bottom. One of the most common is fastweb.com. You can go ahead and set up an account and put in kind of your demographic, and then FastWeb will email you scholarship opportunities, and it's up to you to apply. I do know seniors with, and again, most of this scholarship stuff is mostly for seniors, although you can create an account as a junior for FastWeb. But I do know seniors in the fall, it's pretty busy, you know, applying to colleges in and of itself. The scholarships, applying to different scholarships gets kind of hectic. But that's probably going to be a little bit more over the winter time if you're applying for outside scholarships. So just know that these resources are up there. Those are a few I wanted to highlight tonight. Again, I thank you for coming. We appreciate your being here. And I'm going to turn it over to Marina Pasquale from ISAC. Thank you so much.
Okay, is it working? Okay. Thanks for the introduction, Tom. As you said, my name's Marina Pasquale. I'm from ISAC, and tonight I'm going to be talking about the financial aid process. Okay, so your first question is probably, what is ISAC? So ISAC stands for the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and we help high school students and college students with the college application process and the financial aid application process. We give workshops, presentations, and have office hours to help students all across the state. Our mission statement is to provide Illinois students with information and assistance to help make education beyond high school accessible and affordable. So a lot of people, when they think of college, they typically only think of four-year bachelor's degrees, but there's a lot of different types of college. One type is a vocational and trade degree, and for that you would have to attend a trade school or community college for about 2 years, and you can get degrees in subjects like welding and plumbing, and even becoming a paralegal. So that's a really great option. There's also associate's degrees, and you can go to a community college for about 2 years and get an associate's degree, and then use that to transfer to a 4-year school and get a bachelor's degree. That's what I did. I went to College of DuPage and then transferred to UIC and got a bachelor's degree, and that saved me a lot of money. So that can be a really great option for a lot of students looking to save money. And then there's also master's degrees, which will take an additional 1 to 3 years after a bachelor's degree in order to get a more advanced degree. Okay, so this chart shows the value of a college degree, and it basically just shows that students who go beyond a high school diploma and get some type of college degree typically earn more each week and are unemployed less often. So we think of college as a huge investment in your student's future. Okay, so when you're planning for college, there's probably a lot of questions that you have, like, how much will it cost? Can I afford it? What's financial aid and how do I file for financial aid? When and how do I apply, and where can I get help? So tonight I'm going to be covering all of those questions, and if you have any additional questions, Tom and Darcy are going to be walking around with microphones, so they'll be able to answer that. So what is financial aid? We define financial aid as any money borrowed, earned, or given that can help your student pay for college. And we typically think of it as the amount that is the difference between what your family can afford and how much college costs. Okay, so there's many different types of financial aid. The first is gift aid, and like the name implies, it's a gift. You don't have to pay it back. Think of it as like a gift from your grandparents. Hopefully you wouldn't have to pay that money back. And there's 2 different types of gift aid. There's grants and scholarships. So grants are based on financial need, and your student would have to fill out a financial aid form in order to receive it. And then there's also scholarships, which are based off of some sort of attribute or merit, like a student with a high ACT score or a student who excels athletically might receive a scholarship. And then there's also self-help aid. And this type of aid requires a lot of additional responsibilities for the student. So the 2 types of self-help aid are loans. That's money that you'll receive, and then you'll have to pay back with interest after you graduate. And then work study, which I'm going to be talking about on the next slide. So work study is a need-based employment program which provides on and off-campus jobs to students. Work study jobs are really great because students have a lot more flexibility in their hours, and work study jobs typically focus on students being students first and workers second. So I didn't have a work study job when I was in college. I worked in a restaurant, and when it was my finals week or midterm week, they didn't really care. They focused more on getting the job done. A work-study job would prioritize your hours during those periods of time. And in order to be eligible, you have to fill out a FAFSA. Your student would have to say that they are interested in a work-study job. We recommend that your student says they are definitely interested in having a work-study job if they're considering having one at all, because if they say they don't know if they're interested or they're definitely not, they might not get one because these jobs are extremely competitive. And it's not a contract. If they say they're interested in a work-study job, they'll still have to complete an application once they arrive at the school. So don't think of it as like signing a contract when you're filling out a FAFSA. So these are the 4 sources of financial aid. Through the federal government, the U.S. Department of Education provides a lot of financial aid. The state government through ISAC, where I work, and then college, as Tom said, colleges provide a lot of financial aid. So definitely look on the website of whatever colleges your student is applying to. And then outside and private sources, your parents' jobs, your job, if you volunteer in the community, if you're, in any sort of extracurricular activity or religious group, a lot of these organizations provide scholarships for your students. So be on the lookout and see if there's any additional sources of funds. Okay, so these are what we call the must get to know financial aid sources, and we recommend, writing down these websites because they're going to be really important and come up frequently. The first one is where I work, ISAC, Illinois Student Assistance Commission. At isac.org, you can find out a lot of information about state financial aid and the grants that we offer there. And then the U.S. Department of Education, studentaid.gov, you'll find a link to the FAFSA there, and just a lot of additional information about loans, scholarships, and grants. Okay, so these are the big grants for 22-23 when your student will be in college. So the first one is the MAP grant, and that's through ISAC. It's state financial aid, and it is for up to $5,496 a year. And then the second one is the Pell Grant, and it's through the U.S. Department of Education, and it's for up to $6,495. Sorry. And these two amounts can be stacked, which means they can be used together for a total of $11,991, which is a huge savings in tuition. So definitely fill out a FAFSA because that's how you know if you're eligible for these grants or not. So we already talked about the MAP program, but these are additional grants and programs that the state offers for your students. The first one is the Illinois Veterans Grant, the Illinois National Guard Grant, and the Grant for Dependents of Police, Fire, and Correctional Officers. If you have questions about these, I would recommend you look on our website or talk to me after the presentation because there's a lot of interesting requirements within these grants, so they can be kind of difficult. And then the teaching programs are the Minority Teachers of Illinois Scholarship and the Special Education Teacher Tuition Waiver. If your student is interested in becoming a teacher, I would make sure that they are definitely sure they want to teach, because if they accept these grants, they'll have to serve as a teacher for a few years, or they'll have to pay them back as a loan. So it's really important that your student knows that they want to be a teacher before accepting any of this. Also, the teaching programs cannot be stacked. They cannot be used together. Okay, so here are some grants from the U.S. Department of Education. We already talked about the Pell Grant a little bit, but the other one is the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, and then the TEACH Grant. The TEACH Grant has the same requirement as the teaching programs from the state, but the great thing about the TEACH Grant is that it can be stacked with the state teaching program. So you can use that in addition to a state teaching program. And then here are some campus-based programs, the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, and then Federal Work Study, which we already talked about. Both of these are subsidized by both the government and the college that your student is attending. So you have to make sure that the college your student wants to go to has these programs available, and you would find out if you are eligible for them by filling out a FAFSA. So tonight we're only going to be talking about loans from the U.S. Department of Education, but all of these factors are really important to know for whatever type of loan you decide to get. So make sure to pay attention. First, you should definitely know the source of the loan, where it comes from. You should know if it's subsidized or unsubsidized, and I'll explain the difference in a minute. And then you should know the interest rate of the loan to know how much you'll have to pay back, and then the repayment options and grace period. A grace period is the period of time between when your student graduates and when they have to start repaying the loan. So subsidized versus unsubsidized. The main difference between these two is the question, when will the interest begin to accrue? So for direct subsidized loans, these are need-based loans determined by the FAFSA, and the interest is paid by the federal government while a student is in school at least half time, during grace periods, and during deferment. So we typically say if a student takes out $1,000 in loan right when they graduate from Matea, by the time they graduate from college, they would have to pay back $1,000 because the government is paying for the interest the whole time that that student is in school, at least half time. Versus direct unsubsidized loans, these are not need-based loans, and a student is always responsible for paying the interest. So if a student takes out, again, $1,000 right after graduating from here, and then they need to pay it back by the time they graduate college, they'll have to pay significantly more than $1,000 because they're paying the interest the whole time they're in school. Okay, so here are the federal loan programs for, it should say 22, 23. Students should pay attention to the top two programs, the direct subsidized and direct unsubsidized for undergraduate students. The first one, again, is need-based, and then the unsubsidized is not need-based. The interest rate is 3.73% fixed. It'll stay the same throughout the whole time your student is in college, and then a grace period. They'll have 6 months between the time they graduate and the time they'll have to pay that loan back. And then parents should pay extra attention to the Direct Plus parent/graduate loan at the bottom. And that is an unsubsidized loan. Again, you'll have to pay the interest while your student is in school, and it's credit-based. So they'll evaluate that when giving out that loan. It's at a 6.28% interest rate, fixed, and repayment starts within 60 days. Something important for parents to know is if you get this loan, you cannot put it into your child's name. You can't transfer it. So if you want the loan, you would have to keep it and you'd have to pay it back yourself. Sorry, I can't hear. Oh, sure. The Direct Plus, yeah. Oh, sure. So the direct unsubsidized at the top, closer to the top, the student would take that loan, and that would be in their name, versus the Direct Plus, the parents would have the loan in their name. You'll find out what you qualify for on your financial aid offer. Sure. So here are the maximum direct loan amounts for 2022 to 2023. Most of your students will be considered dependent students. Most students under the age of 24 are dependent students unless there is some sort of extreme circumstance. So for the first year, their freshman year, they'll have a maximum of $5,500 they can potentially take out in loans if they are eligible. And that's a maximum of $3,500 subsidized. So again, that would be the federal government covering the interest while they're in school half-time. A really great thing about this is that each year you can take out an increased amount of loans, which means you'll continue to have that really low interest rate, versus if you decide to get another loan, a private one, it would have a much higher interest rate. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do you apply for financial aid? For most students, they'll be applying to financial aid through the FAFSA. If you are ineligible to apply to the FAFSA because of a citizenship issue, then you will be applying to the alternative application for Illinois financial aid if you are qualified. And then some colleges have additional forms like the CSS profile, and that's run through the College Board. So it's really important to go to the financial aid page of whatever school your student is applying to and make sure that you have a completed financial aid submission before the deadline in order to make sure your student is getting all the aid they are eligible for. Next slide, please. So the FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And again, it's the first step for most students in the financial aid process. And it's used to apply for federal and state financial aid programs. A lot of parents think they are ineligible for financial aid, but it's really important that your student still applies because there's a lot of grants and scholarships that colleges give out. So even if they don't qualify for state and federal aid, they might still get a grant or a scholarship from their school. And the application is available at no cost. That's really important. Unfortunately, there's a lot of scam websites trying to make students pay for them, but you should never have to pay for a FAFSA. Next slide, please. And then the alternative application for Illinois financial aid, also called the alternative app. This is only for state financial aid, and it's only open to qualifying undocumented students and transgender students who are not eligible to complete a FAFSA. Again, some colleges use it to award institutional aid, so it's really important that students apply even if they think that they won't receive any money through state aid. And again, the application is available at no cost through the ISAC website. That's who would be dispersing the money. So never pay for an alternative application or a FAFSA. And students should complete either the FAFSA or the alternative application, but never both. If you are eligible to complete a FAFSA, that's the form you should complete. But if you're not, then you should try to fill out an alternative application. Next slide, please. So here is some additional information. You're going to want to apply to the FAFSA or the alternative app as soon as possible after it opens on October 1st. But some colleges have additional deadlines, so make sure that you check with your school and that you are completing these forms before their deadline. A lot of the funds are first come, first serve, so it's really important to try to fill it out as soon as possible so you can get all of the aid that you're eligible for. Who fills it out? High school seniors and college students. You're going to have to refill out the FAFSA every single year that you're in college if you want to continue receiving aid. So it's really important that you save all of your information and continue to fill out the form. So how do you fill it out? You can go to fafsa.gov or studentaid.gov to fill out the FAFSA, and then the alternative application, you can go to the ISAC website /alternative app, and then you'll find it there. And then why do you need it? To determine eligibility for state, federal, and institutional aid. Next slide, please. So parent information. Again, most students will be considered dependent students if they are under the age of 24. It's only in extreme circumstances that a student would be considered independent. For financial aid purposes, there's only 3 types of parents: biological, adoptive, and step parents if they are currently married to a biological parent. No one else should provide any information on the FAFSA or alternative application. Legal guardians are not considered parents for financial aid purposes, and if parents are divorced, report information about the parent the student lived with the most in the last 12 months. Next slide, please. So what information is needed to complete a FAFSA? The FAFSA will require students to provide a social security number. Parents will also be asked for a social security number, but if they don't have one, they can put all zeros on a form. An alien registration number is needed if the student has one, and a federal student aid ID and FSA ID is also required to sign the form, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then the FAFSA and alternative application are going to require tax returns, W-2s, other records of income, banking statements and records of investment, and records of untaxed income. So both the FAFSA and the alternative application will give students 10 colleges that they can submit the form to. But if students have additional colleges that they want to send the forms to, they can process the form, submit it, and then go back, edit it, and add additional schools. So it's really important students have at least one college that they're interested in attending in order to send the form. Next slide, please. So the electronic signature. The FAFSA will require an FSA ID, at least from the student and from one parent. It's needed to sign the FAFSA electronically. Students and parents must each have their own FSA ID, and the FSA ID is needed every year to renew the FAFSA. So it's really important that you save the information, write it down somewhere, because you're going to be using it every single year. And parents who do not have a social security number cannot have an FSA ID, but they have the option of printing out the form, signing it, and then mailing it to the address on the form. And then for the alternative application, a PIN will be needed to sign the form electronically. Students and parents must each have their own PIN, which will be generated by email through ISAC. And the PIN is needed every time you renew the alternative application. So again, write it down in a safe spot because you'll need it every single year. And then to obtain a PIN, parents only have to provide an email. Next slide, please. Okay, so the IRS data retrieval tool is a really great tool that sort of completes the FAFSA faster and more efficiently. It's going to transfer information from a parent or student, if a student has filed taxes, from their tax returns. So in order to use it, you would hit that you would like to link to the IRS, and then you're going to look up your tax data by entering your address. It's really important that you put your address down exactly as you put it on your tax return. So if you wrote ST, meaning street, write ST again on your data retrieval tool. And then you're going to hit yes, you'd like to transfer the FAFSA. This is completely optional, but it does save a lot of time and it makes the FAFSA a lot more accurate. So I would definitely recommend doing that. Next slide, please. Expected family contribution. So both the FAFSA and the alternative application are going to generate a number called an EFC, expected family contribution. What is it? It's the amount a family and a student can expect to contribute in one academic year to the student's college. And why does it matter? It's used to determine eligibility for most federal and state aid programs and a lot of institutional aid programs as well. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, thanks. Verification. This is a process used by schools to confirm that the data reported on the FAFSA is accurate, or the alternative application is accurate as well. And if you are selected for verification, you might be contacted by your school's financial aid office to submit additional documentation, like a tax return, transcript, a W-2, income information, and a list of members in the household. This is an extremely common process, but it does scare a lot of students. Don't be alarmed. Most schools have a certain number of students that they need to verify the information. So you're just going to work with the college's financial aid department and submit exactly the documents that they requested. Don't try to submit additional documents because it can cause, if they find conflicting information, it can cause a lot of delays. So only submit what they asked for and then submit all of the documents on time so you can still receive the aid you are eligible for. Next slide, please. So how much does college cost? There's two different types of college costs. The first one is direct expenses, and this is what your student will have to pay in order to be considered a student at that university. At most schools, at all schools, you'll have to pay tuition and fee. But at some schools, room and board will also be required, especially for freshmen. So it's important to know if that's required or not. And then the other type of expense is indirect expenses. And these are estimations from the college, basically what they expect a student will have to pay in order to go there. But again, it's just an estimate, and so you might not end up spending as much as the college thinks you will. So for example, they have books and supplies there. At my university, they estimated I would spend about $1,000 per semester on books. I never spent anywhere close to that. I got a lot of PDFs, borrowed from friends, went on Amazon, rented. So it was significantly less. And that's a really great way of trying to reduce college costs, is just look at those indirect expenses and see if you can cut anywhere. And so that will make up the number called the cost of attendance, both the direct and indirect expenses. Next slide, please. So financial need. Your financial need is what is the maximum amount of financial aid your student could receive. And that's calculated by taking the cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution from the FAFSA, and it will create a number called the financial need. Next slide, please. So here's 3 different examples of schools. So imagine College A is like College of DuPage. College B is a local university like NIU, and College C is a private university like DePaul. So they're going to have their sticker price of the college, the cost of attendance, set for for all students, that's their sticker price, the cost of attendance. And then the colleges will each receive your financial aid information, and they'll receive your EFC, which is going to, again, remain fixed, and that number is from the FAFSA or alternative application. So colleges will take their cost of attendance, subtract your EFC, and that's your financial need. And colleges cannot provide more aid to you than that number. So let's say college B is able to meet 100% of your need, while college A is only able to meet like 50% of your need. In that situation, college B might be less expensive for your student to attend than college A. So it's important for your student to look at all of their options and try to apply to different schools, because we see a lot of times, schools, their cost of attendance is a certain price, but it ends up being very different than what your student actually pays. Next slide, please. So after you submit the FAFSA, the financial aid administrator at the college your student wants to attend is going to take that information, and then they're going to package all of the available federal aid, state aid, and institutional aid that they can offer to your student without exceeding the financial need. And they're going to send an offer to you for you to consider. So all of these forms look very different and have a lot of information on them, like the total cost of attendance, what's a student's financial aid eligibility, was the financial need met, what's the EFC, what types of financial aid, again, that subsidized versus unsubsidized loan, it's important to remember the difference, and what's the out-of-pocket cost. Since all these forms look super different, we have this comparison worksheet at the studentportal.isac.org, and you can input all of the information from each college's offer to sort of see what's the best decision for you to make. Next slide, please. So here's some additional tips and reminders. Make sure to complete the FAFSA or alternative application as soon as possible after it opens on October 1st. Again, some of these funds are first come, first serve, so it's important to get all the aid that your student is eligible for. Information reported on the FAFSA and the alternative application is always confidential, and it's only used to determine financial aid eligibility. You might be asked to submit additional documentation for verification purposes to your college's financial aid office. Again, only submit whatever documents that they ask you to submit, and submit them on time. And then supplemental application or forms might be required after your student tells the college that they plan to attend. A lot of times a housing deadline might be required right after they accept their offer. So be on the lookout for additional applications that they have to fill out right away. And then keep track of application deadlines. We recommend using a planner or a calendar because they are scattered throughout the year. So it's really important to know when all of these forms are due. Keep a copy of everything you submit, again, in case there's verification issues, you might need it. And then reapply every year. You'll have to keep applying if you want to continue to get aid. Next slide, please. So we covered a lot of information. This is sort of an overview of the entire financial aid process. So first, your student is going to complete the FAFSA or alternative application. The school will review the application data and ask your student to complete a verification if they are selected. Then you will, then you would submit those documents, and then you'll receive and review financial aid offers and make a choice that's best for your family. Then you're going to respond to colleges and universities. It's important that you accept your offer of admission and financial aid, but it's really important also to tell schools you are not attending that you're not going to go there, because a lot of times those schools have waiting lists and a lot of students want to attend, so that can be really helpful. And then complete all pending processes like a housing deposit and renew your FAFSA or alternative application every year to continue receiving aid. Next slide, please. So this is the ISAC student portal, and we have a lot of really great resources for your family. The first one is College Greenlight, which is now partnered with CapEx, and that has a lot of scholarships and college comparison tools, so you can see what the best school is for you to attend. Financial aid, there's a financial aid calculator, so you can have an estimate of how much aid you'll be receiving without completing the full FAFSA. And then you also have that comparison tool where you can compare your award letters and sort of see all the information a lot more easily. And then Money Management has a game called Claim Your Future. So if students aren't really sure about what major or career they're interested in, they can play that game and get a better idea and learn how to budget with the expected salary of that career. And then Careers and Jobs at IllinoisWorkNet.com has a lot of summer jobs and internships that your students can apply to now or can apply to after they are a college student. And then College Planning Tips has a college checklist that you can use to make sure that your student is on track with the whole college application and financial aid application process. Next slide, please. So the website that I mentioned is at studentportal.isac.org. And then these are also additional websites that will be helpful to you. Studentaid.gov and FAFSA.gov. That's where you'll go to apply to submit your FAFSA. So those are really important to remember. And then isac.org/alternative application if you are filling out an alternative app. Next slide, please. So a lot of students really like texting their questions, especially if they have a really quick question and they just want a fast answer from someone. So we recommend finding the area code closest to your phone number and then texting your name, your full first and last name, and then sending your question, and then someone will respond very quickly to whatever question you have about college or financial aid. Next slide, please. And then that's my information. Thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Marina. That was great. Let me just add a couple of things here before we go on to the question section. Just a couple of reminders. So remember, this fall is when you're applying to colleges. You've seen your families out there. So just to give you an idea of the timeline, is you're going to be applying for those colleges this fall. You're going to be filling out a FAFSA starting October 1st. You're also going to maybe, depending on the school, a lot of times the highly selective schools want a CSS profile. So you're going to be giving all this information to the colleges. You're going to be hearing back at some point whether you got accepted to these universities. And then come the spring, come maybe late winter, early spring, you're going to get what's called that award letter, which is what she was talking about in regards to those direct costs, total cost of attendance, and how much it's going to cost. And I just speak from experience with my own children. It's so important that you know what those direct costs are, the tuition and room and board and fees, and books are always, they always figure about $1,000, like you said. But it's so important to know that, and then how much money is left over. So that direct cost, and remember, I always tell families, scholarships and grants are good money because you don't have to pay them back. But sometimes you'll see these packages that come with lots of loans and things like that. Remember, as Marina was saying, that's money that you have to pay, and you're paying interest on that. So definitely when you get those award letters, if you have questions about them, you can certainly ask those financial aid offices at those universities, or in general, you know, if your son or daughter, if you want to run one of those by me, I can kind of maybe sort through that, some of the direct costs and things, because again, costs, we want our families to make strong financial decisions because sometimes that burden of loans falls upon the students. As we were talking about the PLUS loan, that stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. So it's parent on that one. Whereas the other ones all fall on the student, and that, you know, gets large after time, especially if there's graduate school involved. So, you had a question here? Oh. No? Okay. Yeah, back here. CSS profile. was oftentimes for some of the more competitive schools, you just want to check. I see you have a U of I hat on. It's not at University of Illinois, but like University of Chicago, Northwestern, Notre Dame, those schools are all going to want a CSS profile. And the FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, you're not paying for it. Please don't pay anybody to fill that out for you. But the CSS profile, there is a small fee involved, and it's through College Board. I did put a link on our Mattia counseling site so you could get to the profile. Other questions? Yes? Did you hear that, Marina?
Yeah, it's the tax information from 2020. So whatever you put on your 2020. Right, yeah.
It's correct me if I'm wrong, it's the last complete tax year.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Because it's, right now, your taxes aren't complete, so it's the last complete year is how I always think about it. For 2020, because
I missed the question.
we're in 2021. He's saying it's his tax year of 2020 that he filed in the spring of 2021.
Oh, I see what you mean. I believe you would still use the tax information from 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's an issue or if that information has changed, you would talk to the college's financial aid department, but it should be 2020.
Yeah, that would be your last full year of taxes. Your last complete year. Right. Mhm.
Right, that is affecting a lot of families. And I would say you would put the information from your 2020 taxes, and then you're gonna contact each of the schools that your student is applying to and tell them that you would like to start an appeals process, and they would help you submit whatever documentation you would need to show your situation has changed.
So you'd contact the financial aid office and tell them there's been a change in circumstance, because you have to fill out the form based on those numbers, but clearly, like, situations happen in families and things change, so that's where you'd have to appeal and let them know how things are different now than what that's actually reporting. Does that sound accurate?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you can set up an appointment with me. I do appointments and phone calls to help families fill out the FAFSA, but there's also an FSA ID helpline that I can share later. Yeah.
I can add to that. Sure. I've had good luck because even doing this, you know, when you go and do it yourself, there's a lot of specific questions to your family and things like that. So during FAFSA, and I'm assuming that's still going to be this way this year, but there was it's 1-800-4, the number 4, and then FEDAID, Fed Aid, for Fed Aid. And it's a federal government number too that I've called and used, and it's been live people, and it's open later during FAFSA season as well, for Fed Aid. Yeah, yeah. Or like Marina's crew with ISAC, or sometimes those financial aid offices, those are the experts on the financial aid. Good questions. For the number 4, and then FEDAID, FEDAID, for Fed Aid. Yep.
So, we've already
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yes.
would definitely recommend doing that, and just keep in mind the deadlines of when your student has to decide if they're attending that school or not.
And the key is those award letters, because that's going to give that total cost of attendance. You can see the direct costs. You can see what grants and scholarships you're getting, and then you can see loans or any gap money that's still left.
Yeah, there's going to be a question on the additional, in the parent section, on the additional information about a 529, and it'll have detailed instructions about how to fill in that information there.
Did you have a question
And we
up
have
there?
a question back here.
So I understand. I think she also asked a similar question. So I know that there is only 10 colleges we can put in the FAFSA at one time.
Yes, at one time, you're just going to send the 10, you're going to send as many as you want, up to 10, and then you're going to process it. And then after it's been processed, you can add additional schools if you have more than 10 colleges your student wants to attend.
Okay. So when you are saying is after it processed means, what does it mean? After the EFC being calculated, is that the one or?
The EFC will remain the same. It'll be fixed, but you're just going to send that information to the school, so then that other school can package their financial aid however they want to do it. If they have different institutional aid, they can package it however they want.
Okay.
Marina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when you go in to edit those schools, like you're saying, you have to remove some schools that it's already sent to. You remove those and then you replace those, because once they grab that financial information, then they have it.
Right, and it doesn't matter. If you remove it, they'll still have the information on file, or if you don't, if you keep one that you already sent it to and you send it twice, they don't care. They'll still process it and you'll be fine. If you process it, it should be sent to the school, yes.
And the other thing I'd add too, so there's not any confusion, your son or daughter is going to be applying to colleges on their own through Common App or whatever. They're requesting transcripts through School Links, and that's our systems. When you fill out the FAFSA and you put on your 2 schools, 1 school, 10 schools, whatever you do, it doesn't have to be at the same time. So just go ahead and do your FAFSA after October 1st, and go ahead and put those schools, even if you haven't applied yet, but you're gonna apply, go ahead and put those in there, because it'll be in the college's financial aid office, and then when your son or daughter applies, then they all work together to form that, that award letter that you'll get in the spring. Now also, in regards to that award letter, you will maybe get an acceptance letter before the award letter, like some of you may have already gotten, you senior families, and that might tell you about scholarship money, because usually scholarship money has nothing to do with your financial need. It's just based on your merit for your application. We have another question in the back, and then we can come up front.
So it's along the same lines. Let's say we sent this information to 10 colleges, and then you come back, you get rid of some of those colleges, and then add more. But if your information had changed, right, when you next time send, can we change that information in FAFSA, or once we do that, it's done?
You can change it if it's wrong. You can edit it, but then if life has changed, circumstances have changed, you would have to do the appeals process I was talking about earlier, where you'll have to contact each of your schools and tell them that your life circumstances have changed and you'll need a different EFC. It's not reflective of your 2020 tax return anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Up here. So the question was, if you're applying to, let's say, 12 colleges, or sending your FAFSA to 12, you send to 10, you remove 2 and add 2 back on, how do you know that that college got it? I think usually I think if it's a week or two, it should be good, but maybe they should check with the financial aid office.
You'll know because you'll get a financial aid award letter. So you'll know that that the information has been processed with that letter, so then you can feel free to remove those schools and then add more.
But I don't think you'll have the letter at the beginning, is what he's saying. He's saying like at the beginning, say in October he submits 10, and then he takes 2 off and puts 2 on.
Oh,
He
I
won't
see.
have his award letter yet, so how does he know that the financial aid office got it?
Yeah, I think that's good advice to wait a week or two. But also just finding out that the information has been processed. It should send you like an email or something that it's been processed. And if you are still in doubt, you haven't heard back, I would call the financial aid office of whatever school your student's applying to, make sure they have the information, and then feel free to remove it and then add additional schools. Sorry, I can't hear.
You can check with their financial aid office. I know my own personal experience, it was within a week or two, it was fine. So we removed and then added on. Yep. Do we have any in the back, Ms. Hutzler?
Yeah, regarding the financial information of the parents, if the parents are not on W-2, or if one of the parents is not on W-2 or is a business owner, do they have to provide the business returns, or what kind of financial information they have to provide?
So if you have your own business, they're gonna ask you information about that. Sorry, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what the questions asked. I would bring all of the information relevant to the workshop to work on the application. And you might have to provide that information, especially if your business has over 100 employees. You would have to do that for sure. But I can't quite remember if you'll need it. If you have less employees than that, I'd have to get back to you on that question. Do you know, Tom?
I do not.
Okay.
Probably the best would be to email you, maybe.
Yeah, you can email me or call, and I'll try to find that information and get back to you.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Yes, over here. Usually, the most cases that I've seen, the merit base is based on their merit. Now maybe some of the more highly selective institutions are looking a little more at that money, but typically merit is based on the grades or sports or music. Scholarships are typically for your merit based on that. Now, are there specific cases where they might be looking at some more income, possibly for some of those schools, but in general, scholarships are based on your merit, your grades, and things like that. Now, I have heard that, and what I've heard about that is, in order to award scholarships, some colleges have said that you have to at least have filled out the FAFSA, I think for record-keeping purposes, is what I was told when we were looking at that particular case. Like, in order to receive these scholarships, we want to make sure you have at least filled out the FAFSA. But typically, if you look at, and there's a lot of websites out there for certain colleges. Colleges award scholarships in many different ways. Some of these schools have grids, and it says if you get this ACT and this GPA, or a lot of times this year it's based on GPA, you get this amount of money. So more commonly it's based on that. I'm not going to say that there's none that aren't going to look at that, but for the most part, scholarships are based on your merit. Scholarship money and grant money, good money. Well, I would say the detriment is you don't know exactly what you're going to get. And I'll give you an example of something I found over the years. In the last 5 years or so, there's been some money given to state schools called Aim High money. And Aim High money is an appropriated fund where it tends to run out, like the MAP grant that Marina was talking about runs out. That's why we want you to apply here in October. But there's this Aim High money, and different universities use it in different ways. And originally, from what I understood about it, it was money that the state gave to the universities, and they matched that to give scholarship money to students. Well, the money, I've heard over and over the years, well, we're not going to get anything. Why should I apply, right? That's commonly what some things I've heard. But some schools in the state of Illinois were giving some of this Aim High money for people who were, I believe it was 6 times the poverty level. And it also took into account the number of children you have, the number of people in your household. So if you had a decent sized household, and you could be making some very nice money, but you'd still fall within 6 times of that range. And to get that money, you'd have to fill out a FAFSA so they know. So I would always advise, fill it out. It is some of your time. The FAFSA is not as in-depth as the CSS profile. The profile will take you a while. The FAFSA, not as long, but I don't think it would hurt, and it's free. But you can choose, by the way, the FAFSA or the Illinois Alternative app are a graduation requirement now by the state of Illinois. It's not a Mattia thing. We have to follow it, but it's the state of Illinois. Now, if you choose that you don't want to fill out the FAFSA, we're not going to bug you about it, but you do have to fill out an opt-out form and turn it into the school. So I had a family last year I was working with that said, Mr. Doherty, we're not going to fill this out. We know we're not going to get anything. We've had some other kids go through. And I said, whatever. We're not here to pressure you. So just fill out that form. But, all of you senior families in here have to either do the FAFSA, the Illinois Alternative, or an opt-out form, just so you know, for graduation. Does that help?
Oh, sorry. One thing I wanted to mention, some times in the past when our financial aid directors have come and spoken to families, they have, from colleges, have mentioned that even if you think you may not qualify, sometimes you do qualify for some financial assistance, but sometimes what they advise is it doesn't hurt to submit the FAFSA, because sometimes on occasion families do run into circumstances where there is a change in a job situation or perhaps a medical situation that's unexpected, and you will have that FAFSA on file already, and then you simply would then contact your child's college to work through that appeal or that special circumstance process, because you've already had the FAFSA filed. So, it's not anything people, want to think about happening, but sometimes something unexpected does happen, and it's helpful to already have that information in there, on file, and then also, from the standpoint of you never know what you might qualify for as well.
The other thing too I'd add is sometimes for the highly selective universities, they have different thresholds for income, and sometimes even people making over $100,000 a year may fall into some of those brackets, and they wouldn't know unless you filled that out. So yes. You do.
So I didn't hear the question.
He was asking if you have if there are siblings in the family.
Yes, the FAFSA is going to ask you how many people are in your household and also how many of them are in college. So that's a big consideration.
And you'll fill out the FAFSA for every student should fill out a FAFSA, basically, is how you think about it, who's going to be in college the following year. You're going to fill a FAFSA out. You can't fill it out for the following year until October 1st. Like now we're filling it out starting October 1st for the start in the fall of 2022. So that's kind of how you think about it. You're starting so if you had a current sophomore in college, you're filling out next year's FAFSA starting October 1st. Does that make sense? Yes.
Quick question. How does the college savings factor in, especially 529, into the eligibility?
Sure. So there's going to be a question about that in the parent financial aid section or the parent financial section, and it's going to be in the additional information, and so you can report it there. It's kind of a complicated equation, but yeah, that's going to be factored into it.
You had a question here?
So schools will have their own individual deadlines. We just say as soon as possible because, the money runs out. Technically, the federal deadline is 18 months after it opens. But again, since schools have their own deadlines, they might not consider you after, their date.
Great questions you have.
Is there any update on the College Illinois program? I know it was frozen. I know they were talking about adding money to it. Do you have any more info on it?
You said the College Illinois program?
Yeah.
Prepaid tuition?
Oh, unfortunately, I haven't heard any updates about that.
I just want to know, how many scholarships can you use or apply for?
That's sort of a difficult question because it really depends on the type of scholarship you're talking about. If it's all outside scholarships, there's not really a limit, right? You could just stack as many as possible. But at some schools, they'll have certain requirements, like you can only have this scholarship and you can't stack it with other scholarships. So you really have to look at the eligibility and talk to your school in terms of institutional aid. And then in terms of the state grants, the only one I know that you can't use together is the teaching programs, but yeah, that's all I'm familiar with. So whenever you apply for a scholarship, it'll have an eligibility page and you can find out more information on that.
Marina used this term a lot tonight. She said the word stack or stackable. That would be a vocab word that I would encourage you all to ask these colleges, because what it means is, you might get some scholarships based on that application. And it's for, typically what happens is you'll see this scholarship's worth $5,000 per year based on you getting a certain GPA, maybe it's a 3.0. And then they might have some other scholarships, maybe in the College of Business or the College of Engineering or somewhere else, or a diversity scholarship through that university. So the question you need to ask these colleges is, if that College of Engineering scholarship is stackable on top of the admissions scholarship. The answer you would like to hear is yes, because that means you can get them both. So that's a huge thing. Is this stackable? And then just double check with the colleges if you get any outside scholarships from the Naperville Garden Club or the JCs or something from your work. Would that affect your financial aid package at that particular school? Oftentimes I hear it will not, and you can just add that on top, but you just want to ask these particular questions before you're making that decision to commit to a school, and that committing date is May 1st of your senior year, May 1st. You might get asked to commit earlier because of housing and different things like that. That's up to you. I understand why people might want to commit. Maybe they know about the money, everything like that. Or they're not worried about losing a small down payment. But May 1st is the committing date. to tell your college that you're going to go to those particular institutions. Anything else before we wrap up? Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming. It's great to see you all here. Marina, thank you so much for being here and being a partner. Darcy, thanks for being here, and drive safely. Take care. You're welcome. Thanks.